On the high ridge, Pride asked for a crown and received a walking staff. Madog gripped the cold stone and hauled himself up the last ledge as the wind drove sheep smell and wet heather into his face. Below him, the valley fires burned small and mean. Above him stood Cerrig Doeth, black against the cloud. If the old stone held wisdom, why had it given none to him? He was the fastest drover in CWM Pennant. He could turn cattle on a narrow track with one whistle and a flick of his hazel switch. He could cross a flooded ford when older men stayed back and argued. Yet every winter council ended the same way. The elders nodded to one another, named prices, grazing rights, and kin debts, and sent Madog to wait outside with the boys. That morning, he had spoken out of turn before all of them. Grain was short, 2 lambing fields had failed. A boundary wall lay broken where the river had bitten through. Madog had struck the table with his fist and told them they were slow, fearful men who loved talk more than work. Old Murig the smith had stared into the fire and said, "Quick hands do not make a clear head." The room had gone still. Madog had walked out before his mother could catch his sleeve. Now he climbed to the standing stone people named the Stone of Wisdom. Some said druids had prayed there before churches stood in the valleys. Some said no prayer lived there now, only weather and memory. Madog did not care which tale was true. He wanted one thing, a charm that would make every elder hear him. He laid both palms on the stone. It felt damp, rough, and older than any wall in the valley. "Give me sense beyond them," he said into the wind. "Give me words none can deny." The air dropped still. No bird called. From the grass at the stone's foot, a plain ash staff rolled against his boot, as if a hidden hand had nudged it. Pale grain ran down its length. Near the top, a dark knot looked like a shut eye. Madog snatched it up. The wood felt warm. Then a voice came, not from sky or earth, but through the staff against his palm. "Keep my counsel only if you listen before you speak. Learn from those you pass by. If you use me to stand above others, I will turn to dead weight in your hand." Madog frowned. A riddle and a stick. He had climbed through rain for this. Still, he carried the staff down the mountain. The knot beneath his thumb seemed to pulse once, like a heartbeat held in wood. The staff at the sheepfold. By dusk, Madog had told no one what happened on the ridge. He feared laughter more than he feared spirits. He drove his small herd toward the winter fold, the ash staff tapping stones by his side. Each tap sounded sharper than it should, as if the hill listened back. In the sheepfold, patience drew life from pain while pride stood holding the light. At the fold, old Sion the shepherd woman knelt beside a ewe in hard labor. Her hands were red from the cold. Steam lifted from the animal's flank. 2 boys hovered nearby, pale with worry. Madog stepped forward at once. "Turn her. Pull the lamb free. If you wait, you lose both." The staff grew heavy. Its end sank into the mud as though lead hid inside it. Sion did not look up. "Hold the lantern," she said. Madog almost answered with anger. Then he felt the weight in his palm and bit down on the words. He took the lantern instead. Its iron handle burned his chilled fingers. The ewe cried, a thin broken sound, and the smell of blood and wet wool spread under the low roof. "There," Sion said to the older boy. "When a beast fights pain, do not fight back with force. Give it room. Touch where it fears you least." Her voice stayed calm. She waited between each movement. She eased the lamb's forelegs free, turned its shoulder, and drew it out in one long patient pull. The lamb hit the straw and coughed. The younger boy laughed from pure relief, then covered his mouth in shame at the sound. Sion sat back on her heels. "You see, hurry has its hour. So does waiting. Mix them wrong and you bury what you hope to save." Madog lowered the lantern. The staff felt light again. He walked home through dark lanes, thinking of the ewe's wild eye and Sion's steady hand. At his mother's hearth, he found her scraping the last meal from a pot for his little sister. The broth smelled of onion and old bones, thin as rainwater. "Only this?" he asked. His mother, Ellen, kept scraping. "Only this tonight. The grain cart from the coast has not come. The mill stream runs low. Next week may bite harder." Madog looked at the bowl in his sister's hands. He had never heard fear in his mother's voice before. She was the sort who mended harness, argued with traitors, and buried grief without display. But now she folded the cloth over the empty loaf board and pressed her palm flat against it for a breath too long. That touch struck him harder than any speech. The valley's want had entered his own house. The next day, men gathered near the churchyard wall to shout over the broken boundary by the river. Each claimed the flood had moved the line in his favor. Madog knew the old path of the bank. He could have named it in a breath. He stepped into the ring and raised his chin. Again the ash staff dragged at his arm. So he waited. A mason named Yorwerth crouched by the stones instead of joining the shouting. He rubbed river silt between finger and thumb, then studied the roots of a torn hawthorn. The water did not only break the wall, he said. It took the soil beneath it 3 months ago. See the hollow? Build here again and the next spade will carry it off. Set the line 1 pace higher or lose your labor twice. The men fell quiet. They looked where he pointed, not where they had wished to look. Madog felt heat rise in his face. He had seen the broken stones, but not the hollow. Speed had carried him past the truth. That night, he leaned the ash staff by his bed. Am I to be made a fool before every tradesman and child? He whispered. The knot in the wood warmed beneath his hand. No voice came, yet he understood the answer in the silence. He had been a fool already. Now he had begun to notice it. Smoke from the smithy. 3 days later, frost silvered the furrows and made the pump handle bite bare skin. Hunger sharpened tempers across CWM Pennant. A widow accused her brother's family of taking meal from the church store. 2 cousins came to blows over a haystack. Even the dogs snapped at one another over scraps. Between forge smoke and winter breath, one hungry child changed the sound of the crowd. Madog carried hides to Murig the smith, hoping work might clear his head. The smithy stood by the stream, its roof blackened with years of smoke. Inside, iron rang against iron in clean bright strokes. Sparks leapt and died on the packed floor. Murig did not greet him with warmth. He took the hides, weighed them in his hands, and said, if you came to ask why elders speak slowly, fetch bellows first. Madog flushed, but he worked the bellows. Warm air rushed against his face. The forge woke with a deeper roar. Murig set a bent plowshare in the fire. Tell me, he said, when metal comes out red, what does a fool do? He strikes it hard, and then, he shapes it. The smith shook his head. He ruins it. Murig laid the iron on the anvil and gave it 3 measured blows. He paused after each one, turning the share by a finger's width. Heat, strike, look, listen, again. If I only strike, I crack the edge. If I only stare, the iron cools and stiffens. Good work asks for both fire and restraint. Madog watched the plowshare flatten true. A smell of coal smoke and hot scale filled the room. He remembered the council table and his own fist coming down like a hammer without aim. When the work paused, voices rose outside. A crowd had formed near the lane. Madog and Murig stepped out into thin white light and saw Rodri ap Nudd, keeper of the hill granary, standing with 2 men from the lower farms. Someone had found his daughter carrying a sack before dawn. The sack held barley. She stole it, one man cried. My children have eaten nettles for 2 days. The girl, no older than 12, clutched the empty sack and stared at the ground. Her lips had gone blue from cold. Rodri looked as if he had aged 10 winters in an hour. The store is counted each market day, he said. I knew nothing of this. Then you are blind in your own house, another answered. A murmur ran through the crowd. Madog felt that old urge rise in him. Step forward, seize the moment, settle it with one hard speech. The ash staff twitched against his palm. Its wood had gone cold. He looked at the girl instead. Mud crusted her hem. One shoe was tied with wool cord where leather had torn away. She did not look cunning. She looked hungry and ashamed. Madog spoke, but softly. Let her answer. The crowd shifted. That alone took effort. People in fear prefer noise to listening. The girl swallowed. Ma'am cannot chew, she said. Her gums bleed. I meant to grind it small and bring it back after my uncle's cart comes from Aber. I meant no insult to the store. No one moved. Wind rattled the bare thorn hedge. Then the widow who had shouted loudest pressed a hand over her mouth. Her anger had found a wall inside itself. She knew what it was to watch a parent fail at the table. Murig spoke next. Count loss if you must. Hunger still sits among us all. Shame one child and fill no bowl. Madog lifted the staff. It no longer fought him. Open the church store under witness, he said. Grind grain for those who cannot eat coarse meal. Mark each share by need, not by who shouts longest. I will drive to the coast road at first light and meet the missing cart. If it broke axle or lost horse, we gain nothing by waiting in anger. This time, the elders did not send him away. They weighed his words because he had first weighed the faces before him. By evening, a small line formed outside the mill. No one smiled. Need leaves little room for that. Yet people stood with less poison in their voices. Madog helped turn the stones until his shoulders burned. At home, his mother set a crust in his hand and looked at him with a quieter gaze. "You have been listening," she said. He looked down at the ash grain running along the staff. "I have only begun." The midwife by the burnt hearth Madog left before dawn with 2 ponies and an empty sled, hoping to meet the lost grain cart on the coast road. Frost cracked underhoof. The hills opened before him in folds of gray grass and black rock. Far off, a raven turned once against the pale sky. At a fading hearth, skill moved in quiet hands while a hungry valley waited outside. By noon he found no cart, only a broken wheel near a ditch and prints leading west. Snow threatened. He could follow the tracks at once, yet a sound from a nearby croft stopped him, a low moan, then a child crying without pause. He turned in at the gate. Smoke crawled thinly from the roof hole. Inside, the heat had faded from the hearth, though ashes still held a red seam. The smell of fever sat in the room, sharp as iron and sour linen. Nest Virchoane, the valley midwife, knelt beside a woman wrapped in blankets. 2 small children pressed against the wall with wide dry eyes. A pot of water trembled above the coals. Nest glanced up. "If you came for gossip, leave. If you came with strong arms, bring more wood and then fetch clean snow in the bucket." Madog obeyed before pride could speak. He split wood until his palms stung. He carried in snow. He steadied the pot. The younger child stared at his ash staff and whispered, "Is that for fighting?" "Not today," Madog said. Nest washed the sick woman's face and checked her pulse. "The fever took hold after the birth," she said. "Her milk has slowed. The baby must feed, or we bury 2 instead of 1. Madog looked at the newborn by the wall, wrapped in a faded shawl. The child made no noise now, only rooted weakly at the cloth. He had seen cattle born in sleet and lambs pulled from death, but this room held another kind of danger. No enemy stood in it. No wall needed raising, yet every breath counted. Nest mixed oat water and honey into a spoon. She let the baby taste a drop, then another. Her hand did not shake. The older child began to cry in silence, shoulders jumping without voice. Nest reached back and touched the child's ankle for one brief moment, never taking her eyes from the infant. That small touch steadied the room more than an order could. Madog went outside for more snow and leaned against the byre wall. His chest hurt. He thought of his own mother when his father died under a falling cart, how she had wrapped sorrow tight and still kept bread moving from board to table. He had been too young then to see the cost in her shoulders. Now he saw it in every woman who bent over a bed and rose again because others needed her standing. He returned and said, "I found wheel tracks west of the ridge. I must go, but tell me what else this house needs." Nest answered without looking up. "Meal ground fine, dry peat, goat milk if the mother weakens further, and quiet, which the valley does not know how to give." Madog nodded. "You will have the first sacks that come back." He rode west and found the missing cart by dusk, axle shattered near a bog crossing. The driver had gone on foot to seek help. One horse stood lame, blowing clouds into the cold. Madog cut saplings, braced the load, shifted grain onto his sled, and turned home under a hard moon. By the time he reached CWM Pennant, the church bell was ringing. Not for prayer, for assembly. He drove straight to the green, where men shouted around a torchlit ring. Rhys Gethin, headman of the upper farms, stood with 6 armed sons. Opposite him waited David Lewitt and his kin from the lower stream. Each side claimed the grain should go first to its own houses. Hunger had now put a weapon in old grudges. Madog jumped from the sled. "Stop this." No one listened. Torches hissed in the wind. A child cried from somewhere beyond the crowd. The ash staff burned hot in his hand. For one foolish instant, Madog thought of raising it high and naming himself the stone's chosen voice. He could command, he could shame, he could force a moment's silence and drink it like sweet milk. Then he saw Nest's hand on the child's ankle. He saw Sion, waiting through pain. He heard Murrig counting blows. He lowered the staff. "Rhys," he said, not loudly. "Who in your house cannot chew coarse meal?" The headman blinked, thrown off balance by the question. "My mother." "David, who in your house needs broth before bread?" "My grandson. He took a chill last week." Madog turned so all could hear. "Need first. Pride after. The old, the sick, women nursing children, houses with none to work the handmill. Count them now, here, before all eyes. Then divide what remains by number of mouths. If any man thinks himself greater than fever or old age, Let him say it before the valley. This time the silence came without force. It came because no one wished to be seen denying the weak. When the stone gave no answer, the counting lasted half the night. People named need with reluctance at first, then with blunt honesty. Old mothers. A child with a wasted leg. A shepherd laid up by a fall. A woman who had birthed twins before first frost. Madog marked each household with charcoal on a barnboard while the priest and 2 elders watched. Under torch smoke and cold stars, the valley chose who must eat first and why. There were not enough sacks. That truth lay before them all like a ditch no one could leap. Rodri, the granary keeper, bowed his head. Then we cut shares again. Murmurs rose. Hunger can bear fairness for a short while. Beyond that, it looks for a throat to seize. Madog gripped the ash staff and felt no warmth, no warning, no hidden pulse. He feared the stone had left him. He feared, worse still, that he must speak now without any magic at all. So he spoke from what he had gathered. Open the abbey meadow, he said. Its lower edge stayed green under frost because the spring runs there. Move the weakest sheep there first and keep breeding ewes from slaughter. Murid can mend 3 broken plows by market day if each house brings charcoal in turn. Your worth will reset the river wall higher, not where it failed before. Sion will choose which lambs can be fostered to stronger ewes. Nest must have fine meal and fuel before any feast day store is touched. We cut hunger by 1 bowl at a time, or we bury 1 house at a time. No blessing rolled down from the hill. No light split the clouds. Only faces turned toward one another as people measured the plan against their own hard knowledge. Then Ellen, Madog's mother, stepped forward from the back of the crowd. She carried their last cured ham wrapped in cloth. It had been kept for spring, for a birth, a burial, or some other grave need. In a famine, every household counts its hidden store in silence. To bring it out before others is no small thing. She laid it on the barn board beside the charcoal marks. For broth, she said. For the houses with no teeth left and no strength to grind. After that, shame changed sides. Reese brought a crook of dried cheese. David offered 2 sacks of beans saved for seed, on condition that half the valley help replant his lower field when weather softened. The widow who had cursed the granary girl took off a silver pin and pledged it for coastal meal. Bridge by bridge, the valley crossed its own fear. 3 weeks passed. The snow came, then broke. Men repaired walls where the river had bitten deep. Women turned coarse grain into thin cakes and broth that could stretch across hungry days. Children gathered nettles and sorrel when the frost eased. No one called it plenty. Yet no grave freshened on the slope that winter. Madog climbed once more to Cerrig Doeth when the first lambs began to test their legs in the thaw. The air smelled of wet earth and sheep dung. Larks stitched sound above the hill. He set the ash staff against the stone and waited. I asked for a mind greater than all others, he said. You gave me work instead. The staff made no sound. Madog smiled then, though the wind bit his ears. He understood at last why the stone now kept still. It had already answered him in the only way that mattered. He did not leave the staff there. He carried it down the slope, not as a badge, but as a reminder with weight in it. Years later, when disputes rose in CWM Pennant, people sometimes called for Madog. He never sat above the rest. He stood where all could see his hands. He listened to shepherds, midwives, smiths, mothers, and boys with mud still on their boots. When he spoke, the valley heard not one voice, but many gathered into one plain sentence. And if a proud youth laughed at the old ash staff he carried, Madog only placed it in the young hands and said, Hold this while others speak. If it grows heavy, do not blame the wood. Some laughed once, few laughed quick.